Can everyone hear me? Hello. My name's Arthur Jago. I'm finishing up my PhD a little bit away at Stanford, and today I'm going to be talking about technology and indiscrimination. So as many of you know, organizations are rapidly automating the process of human evaluation in organizations. There are a number of startup companies in the Bay Area, like Twine, for example, who if you give them money, they'll let you use their proprietary algorithms to try and figure out if this new candidate you're considering is actually going to be good or not. And many companies that you've heard of, including Google, have sort of flirted with internal human resource algorithms themselves. But there's a lot of interesting research in this area suggesting that these types of algorithms, as Porras was kind of talking about earlier, tend to outperform human experts, for example, hiring managers. So these algorithms' prevalence inspired our research question, which is, well, do people think algorithmic evaluation is as discriminatory as human evaluation? So we ran a bunch of studies looking at this. So in the first study that we ran, like many of you who have had great conversations with this conference and last year, our goal was to look at, well, do people respond differently to recommendations made by a person compared to a machine? So we brought a bunch of Stanford students and staff into the laboratory, and we asked them about a recommendation made by either a person or an algorithm. And specifically, we told them that either this person or this algorithm worked in an organization, and it was this agent's job to handle employee referrals and provide a recommendation about whether or not to bring a candidate in for an interview. And more specifically, participants read that they'd see the outcome of two ostensibly real referrals. So then they saw the two referrals. These are what they looked like. If this was the huge screen from the other room, this would be way more pixelated, so I'm glad that I'm here. And so we modeled these referrals after ones actually used in tech companies in the Bay Area. So they'll have, for example, candidate name, where they went to school, their legality to work, a bunch of quantitative ratings along a variety of dimensions, like reliability, intelligence, and then a short qualitative recommendation. So all participants saw two referrals. And crucially, they saw one referral that had a characteristically Caucasian name, like Max Johnson, whereas the second had a characteristically non-Caucasian name, for example, Zhang Wei. We counterbalanced and randomized all the other information in these experiments. For example, half the participants saw that Max went to Santa Clara, the other half saw UC Santa Cruz. None of that ever explained anything. And we pulled these names from census data, and we actually used a number of different comparisons. For example, East Asian, South Asian, African American, Hispanic, and Arabic. And in all of these cases, as I might have foreshadowed, either this person or this algorithm decides to bring in a Caucasian candidate, but not bring in a non-Caucasian candidate. And then after this, we asked participants, well, how discriminatory was this? And what we found was people actually believed the algorithm's decision was less discriminatory compared to the identical recommendation made by a person. So in study 2, we wanted to use a natural dependent measure. We brought people into lab. They saw the exact same materials. But this time we used an open-ended response to kind of capture their reactions to this situation. We asked them, well, what information do you think this person or the AI, again, the only manipulation in this experiment was the name, used about the applicants to make this decision? So people took it seriously. They talked about all sorts of things like the intelligence rating, the positivity. And what we did was we coded these qualitative responses for explicitly mentioning the candidate's ethnicity. So for example, it is possible they inferred something about the race of the applicants, probably ethnicity implied by the name. And consistent with the first study, what we found is that people believed the person was more likely to use this information compared to an algorithm. And importantly, pre-test suggested that this is not because people believed the algorithm couldn't access or use this information. People believed that the algorithm chose not to use this information. In the last study I'll talk about, we wanted to look at, well, what are the potential organizational consequences of this kind of effect? So we asked a bunch of Stanford alumni, gave them the same materials they read about either an algorithm or a person. This time we used gender instead of ethnicity, though. They saw two referrals, one with a male name, one with a female name. Again, we used a bunch of different names. And they read that this agent decided to bring in the male candidate and then not the female candidate. And so in addition to discrimination, we asked people very broadly whether or not they wanted to sign a petition that we investigate this incident. And we made this really broad on purpose. And what we found is that people were overwhelmingly wanted us to investigate the situation involving the machine. People are really curious about technology. They want to know more about it. They wanted us as researchers to get involved. But we see a significant suppression effect that because people believed the algorithm's decision was less discriminatory, they were more OK with us not investigating it despite this larger total effect. So the one takeaway I'd want you to have from this talk is that algorithms appear less discriminatory than people, even as we discussed earlier, they aren't, for example, in the context of parole decisions. So thank you. Any questions? Yes?
So two classical models in econ, at least, of discrimination are statistical discrimination and then outright prejudice.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking perhaps intuitively people, even if they haven't studied economics, separate the two and say, okay,
yeah.
computers can't be prejudiced, but they can be statistical.
Absolutely. So we were really concerned about that as a potential explanation. So that's one of the reasons why we conducted the second experiment, was just not using those kinds of words. But in all the materials, I didn't have time to go out today, we took a lot of care to refer specifically to the outcome, saying this decision, this outcome, with this thing that's actually happening in the world. That said, I think that's an alternative explanation that's sort of always on our mind and something we're trying to address. Thank you, guys.